Welcome to Calm Mind English. Some people do not quit because they do not care. They quit because they cared. So much at the beginning that the silence, after the first slip, feels heavier than expected. It can be confusing when something matters to you, and still, you keep walking away from it. Maybe you have done this many times. A new plan begins with real hope. You clean your space, open a fresh notebook, make a schedule, and tell yourself that this time will be different. On the first day, your mind feels clear. The idea of change gives you energy. You can almost see a better version of your life, and for a moment, that picture feels close enough to touch. So you start. You wake up earlier. You write the list. You study, train, apply, save, organize, or rebuild. You do what you promised yourself you would do, and it feels good to finally move. But a few days later, life enters the room again. Work runs long. Your body feels heavy. A message distracts you. One task takes more time than you expected. The clean start begins to lose its shine. You miss one day, and at first it seems small. You tell yourself you will continue tomorrow. That sounds reasonable, and maybe it even is. Then tomorrow becomes awkward. The task is still there, but now it feels farther away. You are no longer stepping into a fresh beginning. You are stepping back into something you already interrupted. That tiny break changes the feeling. What was simple now carries pressure. The notebook is still on the table. The plan still exists. But your relationship with it has shifted. This is where many people start to misunderstand themselves. They say, I always ruin things, or I never stay consistent. They turn one pause into a personal identity, as if a few unfinished days reveal a permanent flaw. Imagine a man sitting at his kitchen table on a Monday night. The house is finally quiet. A cup of tea has gone warm beside him. He opens a new notebook and writes 3 words at the top of the page. Start again tomorrow. He means it. There is nothing fake in that moment. He is not trying to impress anyone. He is tired of stopping, tired of feeling scattered, tired of watching weeks disappear while important things stay undone. He makes a clean plan. Wake up at 6. Walk for 20 minutes. Study English for 30. No phone until after breakfast. Sleep earlier. Keep going even on bad days. It looks simple on paper. It looks calm, organized, mature. For a few minutes, the plan gives him relief. The future feels less messy because it has shape now. The next morning, he follows it almost perfectly. He wakes up with effort, but he gets up. He walks outside in the cold air. He studies before work. He feels proud in a quiet way, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. That evening, he thinks, maybe this is the version of me that finally changes. The second day is harder, but still good. The third day is uneven. By the fourth day, work becomes stressful. He comes home later than expected, eats standing in the kitchen, looks at the notebook, and feels resistance before he even sits down. He tells himself he deserves one night off. Again, this sounds reasonable because sometimes it is. Rest is not failure. A missed day is not a collapse. But something subtle begins there. The next morning, the walk feels less natural. The study session feels heavier. The promise no longer feels fresh. It feels watched. Now he is not just doing the task. He is also thinking about the break, the plan, the promise, and the uncomfortable question of whether this pattern is happening again. That is how many cycles begin to fall apart. Not with one huge disaster. Not with a final decision to give up. Most of the time, it happens quietly. A person simply becomes more and more aware of the growing distance between what they meant to do and what they are actually doing. That distance creates discomfort, and discomfort, when it is repeated, changes the emotional tone of the whole effort. Soon, the task itself is no longer the only thing in front of you. The task now carries memory. It carries the memory of enthusiasm, the memory of slipping, and the fear that this story may end the same way it ended before. This is why starting can feel exciting, while continuing can feel strangely personal. Starting lives in imagination, continuing lives in reality. In imagination, there is no friction yet. There is only possibility. You can picture yourself becoming focused, disciplined, calm, strong, and clear. The image is bright because it has not touched a real day yet. Reality is different. Reality includes poor sleep, inconvenient timing, emotional dips, boredom, interruptions, and moments when you do not feel inspired at all. Reality asks for repetition before reward. A lot of people think they quit because they do not want success badly enough. But that explanation is often too simple. Many people want the result deeply. What they struggle with is staying present once the feeling of a clean beginning is gone. The beginning gives you emotional fuel. It gives you novelty. It gives you a temporary sense of control. But after that, effort becomes ordinary. And ordinary effort is where the truth shows up. Not the truth about your value, but the truth about your current habits, limits, energy, and emotional patterns. That can be hard to face. Maybe you have felt this in small ways. You decide to exercise, and the first few sessions feel hopeful. Then one evening your body feels heavy, and suddenly the whole plan seems more complicated than it did before. Maybe you try to improve your English. You study for several days, feel encouraged. Then one difficult practice session makes you feel slower than you hoped. The chair, the desk, the book, the app, all of it starts to feel slightly uncomfortable. Maybe you tell yourself you will save money, wake up earlier, apply for jobs, clean your room, read more, or be less dependent on your phone. At first, each promise feels possible. Then the emotional weight changes, and you begin avoiding the very thing you chose on purpose. That avoidance can feel irrational. Part of you still wants the change. Another part of you feels drawn away from it. This inner split is deeply human. It is not rare. It is not proof that something is wrong with your character. Many people live inside this cycle for years. They become very good at beginnings. They know how to create a strong Monday. They know how to set goals by tools, write plans, and imagine new routines. What they do not understand yet is why the energy disappears so quickly. They blame motivation. They blame discipline. They blame time. Sometimes those things matter. But often, the real issue begins earlier than people think. It begins in the emotional experience of effort itself. At the start, effort feels meaningful. A week later, the same effort can feel exposing. It can bring up frustration, impatience, self-doubt, or a quiet sense of disappointment that no one else can see. That is why quitting is often not a loud act. It is usually a soft withdrawal. You stop checking the plan. You move the notebook aside. You delay the task one more day. You tell yourself you will return when you feel ready again. This is important to notice. Most people do not quit all at once. They drift. They become less direct with themselves. The goal remains in the room, but they stop making eye contact with it. And this drifting can hurt in a very specific way. Not because the task is impossible, but because each unfinished return starts to affect how you see yourself. You begin to doubt your own promises. You say, I know myself. I always stop. You start expecting disappointment before the effort even begins. Once that expectation settles in, even a good plan can feel fragile. The person at the kitchen table is no longer only trying to build a habit. He is also trying to protect himself from the sadness of watching another promise fade. That is why this subject matters. Repeated quitting is rarely just about the thing you stopped doing. It slowly shapes identity. It can make a capable person feel unreliable. It can make a sincere person feel weak. It can make a tired person think they are lazy, even when the deeper story is more complicated. Tonight, the goal is not to judge that pattern. The goal is to look at it honestly. If you keep quitting, the answer may not be that you do not care enough. It may not even be that you lack willpower. The first layer is often much more ordinary and much more painful. You start with hope. Then real life meets that hope. Then the emotional tone changes. Then the task begins to feel heavier than it looked at the beginning. And because many people do not understand that shift, they take it personally. They think the heaviness means they are failing. But heaviness is often just the first sign that the real work has started. Not the glamorous part. Not the part that looks good in a plan. The part where effort meets mood, body, memory, and daily life. That is where many people turn away. Not because they are empty inside, but because they are suddenly face to face with themselves in a more honest light than they expected. This is the daily symptom. You begin with heart. You drift in silence. You look back with confusion. And you wonder why something you truly wanted keeps slipping out of your hands. The answer is not simple, but it is not mysterious either. There are reasons beneath the pattern. And once those reasons become clearer, quitting stops feeling like a personal curse. It starts to look like something that can be understood. And anything that can be understood can be handled with more care. A missed day can leave a strange mark on the mind. From the outside, nothing dramatic has happened. You skipped one study session. You did not go for the walk. You left the application unfinished. The world keeps moving, and no one around you may even notice. But inside, the feeling is often much larger than the event itself. A small break can open a private space where self-judgment begins speaking in a much harsher voice than the situation deserves. This is one of the hidden reasons people keep quitting. It is not always the task that pushes them away. Sometimes it is the feeling that gathers around the task after they fall short of their own ideal. A woman opens her laptop after work with every intention of continuing the course she started last week. The lesson is still there. Her notes are still saved. The next step is simple. Yet before her hand reaches the keyboard, a heaviness appears. It does not announce itself clearly. It does not say, "I am shame." It appears as hesitation, delay, tired scrolling, checking small things first, getting a glass of water, standing in the kitchen longer than necessary. On the surface, it looks like procrastination. Underneath, something more delicate is happening. She does not only need to resume the course. She also has to face the fact that she already stepped away from it. That memory changes the emotional cost of returning. Many people think quitting happens when interest disappears. In some cases, yes, but often interest remains. The problem is that returning no longer feels neutral. It feels exposing. When effort is fresh, you can meet it with curiosity. When effort has already been interrupted, you may meet it with self-consciousness instead. The task starts to feel like a mirror. You sit down to continue. But now you're not just learning, writing, training, or building. You're also seeing evidence that you are not as steady as you hope to be. That stings in a quiet way. For some people, this sting is small and easy to move through. For others, it reaches much deeper. It touches an old fear that says, if I cannot stay consistent, maybe I'm not the kind of person who finishes things. Maybe I only like the idea of change. Maybe I'm fooling myself again. These thoughts are painful, so the mind looks for relief. That relief rarely arrives as a clear decision. It usually comes as avoidance. You tell yourself it is too late in the day. You say you will do better tomorrow. You decide to wait until the weekend so you can restart properly. You look for a cleaner moment, a calmer mood, a more perfect return. What you may actually be waiting for is not time. You may be waiting for the discomfort to disappear. The trouble is that avoidance gives short-term relief and long-term damage. The moment you step away, the pressure drops. You no longer have to face the task, the missed day, or the uneasy feeling attached to it. For a little while, that feels better. But the relief teaches the brain something dangerous. It teaches the brain that distance is soothing. So the next time discomfort appears, stepping away feels even more natural. This is how quitting can become a form of emotional escape. Not escape from effort alone, escape from self-judgment, escape from the small wave of shame that rises when reality does not match the image you had of yourself. Shame does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is only a subtle shrinking inside. You open the notebook and feel less capable than you did a week ago. You look at the language app and suddenly feel slower than other people. You think about the gym and imagine yourself as the person who keeps disappearing. The mind does not enjoy standing inside that feeling, so it moves away. Very often, it calls that movement laziness because that word is quick and familiar. But laziness is not always the right name. Sometimes what looks like laziness is self-protection. A person protects themselves from the pain of seeing a gap between their standards and their actual behavior. Instead of facing the gap gently, they avoid the whole scene. This can happen in very ordinary moments. A father says he will study English after the children fall asleep. He truly wants to improve. Better communication matters to him. A stronger future matters to him. He is serious. But one night he is too exhausted and skips it. The next night, when the house becomes quiet again, he does not feel simple resistance. He feels a private embarrassment that he cannot explain. The book on the table now seems to ask a question. Are you really doing this? Or are you just another person who keeps saying you will change? That question hurts. So, instead of sitting with the book, he checks his phone. He watches videos for 40 minutes. He tells himself he needed a mental break. In a sense, he did. But what he needed even more was a way to return without feeling condemned by his own mind. This is the part many people never learn. They know how to demand effort from themselves. They do not know how to re-enter effort after disappointment without turning cruel inside. And cruelty, even when it is quiet, drains energy. If every return comes with inner criticism, then the task will slowly start to feel hostile. Not because the task itself is harsh, but because the mental atmosphere around it has become sharp. This is why some people are strong in emergencies, but inconsistent in private growth. In emergencies, action is clear. There is no time for reflection. You simply do what must be done. But personal change unfolds slowly. It leaves room for thoughts, comparison, memory, and interpretation. That room can fill with judgment very easily. The more judgment fills the room, the more tempting it becomes to avoid the room entirely. There's another layer here. Some people do not quit because they hate effort. They quit because effort has become tied to worth. Every attempt feels like a test of identity. If the workout goes well, they feel good about themselves. If they miss 2 days, their mood drops. If the study session is focused, they feel hopeful. If it goes badly, they feel personally diminished. When progress and self-worth become tangled together, the task becomes emotionally expensive. Now, every small inconsistency feels bigger than it is. It is no longer just a missed routine. It feels like evidence. Evidence that you are scattered. Evidence that you lack discipline. Evidence that you may not become who you hope to become. And once effort starts producing that kind of pain, quitting makes psychological sense. It may be unhelpful, but it is understandable. The mind says, if this activity keeps making me feel small, maybe I should move away from it. That does not mean the mind is wise in that moment. It means the mind is trying to reduce pain with the tools it knows. A lot of people have never been taught how to face imperfection without turning it into identity. So every unfinished week becomes heavier than it should be. They do not say, "This week was uneven." They say, "This is who I am." That sentence is dangerous because it makes change feel impossible. Once a behavior becomes identity, the future starts to narrow. You no longer see one broken pattern. You see a permanent self. Then quitting becomes easier. Because why keep returning to a battle you believe your nature will always lose? This is why hidden psychological pain matters so much. The pattern is not only about planning, time management, or motivation. It is also about the meaning you give to interruption. If a missed day means, "I am human and I need to resume," you can continue. If a missed day means, "I have exposed the truth about myself," then continuing becomes much harder. One interpretation leads back to the task. The other leads into shame. And shame is sticky. It changes posture, attention, and energy. It makes the body want to hide. It makes the mind avoid clear contact. You may notice this in the simplest behavior. You stop tracking your habit. You avoid looking at your budget. You leave the email unopened. You delay stepping on the scale. You keep the textbook closed. These are not random actions. They're small shelters from discomfort. The problem is that every shelter becomes another layer between you and the life you wanted to build. Over time, this creates a painful loop. You care. You begin. You slip. You judge yourself. You avoid. You feel temporary relief. Then you feel disappointment for avoiding. That disappointment makes returning even harder. Eventually, people get tired of this emotional swing. They stop trusting themselves. They stop making promises with a full heart. They lower expectations, not because they are peaceful, but because hope itself feels risky. This is where repeated quitting can quietly damage a person, not just in results, but in relationship with self. You stop seeing yourself as someone who can recover. You start seeing yourself as someone who can only begin and fail. But this interpretation is incomplete. The real pattern is often this. You do not know how to stay kind to yourself when your effort becomes imperfect. So the mind chooses distance over exposure. That is not a moral failure. It is an untrained response. Still, untrained responses shape lives. So they must be understood clearly. If you keep quitting, ask a deeper question. When I step away, what feeling am I trying not to feel? For many people, the answer is not boredom. It is not lack of desire. It is not low ambition. It is the sharp discomfort of meeting their own disappointment. And until that discomfort can be faced without harshness, quitting will keep offering relief. Temporary relief, but relief all the same. This is why the reason you keep quitting may be quieter than you thought. You may not be running from effort. You may be running from the version of yourself you become in your own mind. When effort stops looking clean, the brain loves beginnings for reasons that are not always wise. A beginning is bright. It carries movement, novelty, and emotional reward before any hard repetition has started. You can sit with a new plan and feel productive before the deeper work has even begun. This matters more than many people realize. When you make a fresh promise, the mind often gives you a small chemical reward right away. The plan itself feels satisfying. The notebook, the app, the schedule, the clean calendar, the idea of becoming more disciplined, all of it creates a quick sense of forward motion. In that moment, you are not only imagining change, you are feeling a taste of it. That taste can be powerful. A man lies in bed late at night, scrolling through videos about fitness, language learning, money habits, and morning routines. By the time he sets his phone down, he is full of intention. He decides that tomorrow will be different. He can almost feel the new version of himself arriving. He wakes up and starts well. The plan gives shape to the day. Each small action feels meaningful because it belongs to a story of improvement. For a short time, the brain enjoys that story, but then the experience changes. The first few days of a new routine often contain novelty. Novelty keeps attention awake. It creates stimulation. It makes repetition feel lighter, because the process is still new enough to hold interest on its own. After a while, novelty fades. This is where many people become confused. They assume that the drop in excitement means the goal is wrong, the plan is weak, or they have lost their chance. Sometimes none of those things are true. Sometimes the brain is simply reacting to the loss of quick reward. Planning feels good fast. Progress feels good slowly. That difference is important. The brain is not evil. It is efficient. It tends to prefer what gives relief, stimulation, or reward with less delay. This is why a phone can pull attention so easily, why entertainment feels easier than practice, and why starting over can feel more attractive than quietly continuing. Starting over brings the return of hope. Continuing requires patience. If your routine asks for effort every day but gives visible reward, only after weeks or months, your brain may begin looking elsewhere for something immediate. Not because your goal has no value, but because your nervous system is still sensitive to short-term payoff. Imagine a half-finished to-do list on a desk at night. Beside it, a phone screen lights up. One option offers slow, almost invisible progress through another hour of focused effort. The other offers instant stimulation, immediate relief, and no risk of feeling inadequate. The choice begins to make biological sense. That does not mean it is the choice you truly want. It means your brain is reacting to the reward landscape in front of it. Many good goals are quiet goals. Learning a language, improving health, building savings, cleaning up life, developing skill, repairing attention, all of these often feel dull in the middle. They ask you to repeat simple actions long before the result becomes emotionally exciting. This middle stage is where people often say they lose motivation. What they may actually be losing is dopamine from novelty. At the beginning, the brain says this is new, this might change everything, pay attention. Later, the brain says, I already know this pattern, where is the quick reward? If you do not understand this shift, you may take it personally. You may think, I was serious before, but now I must be weak. But the deeper truth may be that your brain moved from excitement to maintenance. And maintenance does not feel glamorous. A woman decides to improve her English. The first week is surprisingly enjoyable. She uses a new app, listens to a new voice, writes in a clean notebook, and feels encouraged by the structure. By the third week, the content is no longer new. Some exercises feel repetitive. Improvement is real, but not dramatic enough to feel thrilling each day. Now the work must be carried by steadiness, not freshness. This is the point where the phone becomes louder. A message appears. A short video promises entertainment. A quick break offers relief. The brain, already missing the early spark, notices these alternatives immediately. Again, this is not a character defect. It is a competition between reward systems. One path says, keep repeating and trust the delayed result. The other says, feel better now. For tired people, stressed people, and emotionally stretched people, feel better now becomes even more seductive. Delayed rewards are harder to respect when your nervous system already feels under pressure. This is one reason quitting can happen after difficult days. When the body and mind are strained, the brain becomes more interested in fast comfort. The slow satisfaction of long-term goals becomes harder to feel in the moment. The immediate reward of distraction grows stronger. People often describe this as having no discipline at night. But night is usually when fatigue has already lowered resistance. The brain has less patience left. It wants easy reward. This helps explain something many people have noticed in themselves. They can spend an hour planning, researching, and preparing for a goal. Yet struggle to spend 20 steady minutes actually doing the work. Planning itself can become rewarding. It creates a sense of control, and control feels good. It lets you touch the image of progress without enduring the slower discomfort of repetition. In a way, the brain can become attached to the emotional pleasure of setup, while resisting the flatter emotional texture of follow-through. That is why some people are always reorganizing, rewriting goals, choosing new systems, and searching for the perfect method. Each reset creates a fresh hit of possibility. But real change rarely lives in possibility alone. It lives in ordinary repetition after the emotional sparkle has faded. There's also a painful contrast between fantasy progress and live progress. Fantasy progress is smooth. It moves in a straight line. In your mind, the habit continues daily, the energy stays stable, and the result grows steadily. Live progress is uneven. Some days feel strong. Some days feel clumsy. Some days seem to go nowhere. The reward arrives in small pieces, often too quietly for the brain to celebrate. This can make the real path feel disappointing even when it is working. A person starts exercising and expects to feel transformed quickly. Instead, they feel sore, awkward, and inconsistent. Another person starts saving money and expects peace, but instead feels restricted, impatient, and tempted. Another begins a study routine and expects momentum, but instead meets boredom and slow gains. In each case, the goal may still be right. The problem is that the emotional reward is arriving slower than the brain hoped. When that happens, many people turn toward novelty again. A new goal appears. A new method looks exciting. A new schedule feels cleaner. The mind lights up because novelty restores the chemical feeling that steady work has stopped providing. This is why quitting one thing and starting another can feel strangely energizing. It is not only psychological, it is also biological. The new plan gives immediate stimulation, but this cycle creates a hidden trap. You begin to associate good feelings with beginning and dull feelings with continuation. Over time, you may unconsciously prefer restarts, not because they work better, but because they feel better at first. Then your life fills with promising openings and thin endings. You become someone with strong intentions and weak continuity, not because you lack depth, but because your reward system keeps pulling you toward what is bright and away from what is steady. This pattern can become stronger in modern environments. Phones, apps, short videos, endless options, constant alerts. All of these train attention toward immediate reward. They teach the brain to expect frequent stimulation. Against that background, long, quiet effort can start to feel almost unnatural. Reading, studying, saving, practicing, cleaning, exercising, applying. All of these can seem strangely empty compared with the speed of digital reward. And when ordinary effort feels empty, people often assume they are in the wrong path. Sometimes they are not in the wrong path at all. They're simply standing in a low stimulation phase where meaningful growth often happens. This phase is not exciting. It is repetitive. It asks for trust before visible reward. It can feel emotionally flat, but flat does not mean bad. Flat may mean the brain is no longer entertained and must now learn another skill. Staying present without constant stimulation. That skill changes lives. A person who can remain with slow progress without needing every step. To feel exciting becomes much harder to break. They stop depending on emotional spark for movement. They learn to work in ordinary weather. Most quitting happens before that skill becomes stable. People reach the dull middle, lose the emotional high of the beginning, and assume something has gone wrong. Then quick reward pulls them away. The phone wins. The reset wins. The fantasy of a cleaner new start wins. Meanwhile, the half-finished goal sits quietly in the corner. Not because it was impossible, but because its reward schedule was slower than the brain preferred. This is why the real reason you keep quitting may include something very physical and very ordinary. You're trying to build long-range results with a brain that's still reacts strongly to short-range reward. That conflict is real. It does not make you hopeless. It does not mean you cannot change. But it does mean that motivation alone is often not enough. Excitement will not carry you through the middle forever. At some point, the brain must stop asking, does this feel rewarding right now? And begin learning, can I stay here long enough for deeper reward to emerge? That is a different kind of strength. It is less dramatic than motivation. It has less sparkle than a fresh start. But it is the strength that keeps things alive after the chemical shine of the beginning is gone. Without it, quitting will keep feeling natural. With it, progress starts to become possible in a quieter, steadier way. Sometimes quitting begins in the body long before it appears in a decision. A person may think they lost discipline when what they really lost was physical capacity. The mind receives the blame because it speaks in words, but the body often sends the first signal. A long day can quietly change what feels possible. By evening, the shoulders are tight. The eyes are tired. The lower back aches from standing or sitting too long. Meals were rushed, water was forgotten, and sleep from the night before was already incomplete. Nothing about this looks dramatic, but the system is under strain. Then the planned task appears. Study for 30 minutes. Clean the room. Go for a walk. Prepare tomorrow well. Finish the application. Practice speaking. Review the notes. Each task may be simple in theory, but theory does not live in muscles, blood sugar, posture, and nervous system fatigue. A tired body changes perception. What would feel manageable in the morning can feel heavy at night. What looked clear on paper can feel strangely distant when the neck is stiff and the head is full. The task has not changed, but the body receiving the task has. This matters because people often judge themselves at the exact moment their body is least able to support them. A woman comes home after work and stands in her kitchen in silence. She had planned to exercise for 20 minutes. That plan made sense when she wrote it the night before. Now her legs feel dull. Her feet hurt. She slept badly. She has not eaten enough. Her apartment is warm, and her whole body wants stillness. She looks at the mat on the floor and thinks, why do I keep failing at simple things? But the body may be saying something else entirely. It may be saying, I am overdrawn, not broken, not weak, overdrawn. When the body is chronically overdrawn, even small acts begin to cost more than expected. Starting takes more effort. Focusing takes more effort. Resisting distraction takes more effort. Recovery after effort takes more time. In that state, quitting is easier not because values changed, but because energy fell below the level required for follow-through. This becomes more serious when poor sleep is involved. Sleep loss does not only create tiredness. It changes attention, emotional regulation, patience, and impulse control. A sleep-deprived mind often feels less steady and more easily pulled toward quick comfort. Frustration rises faster. Resistance feels louder. A person who slept well may sit down and study with moderate effort. The same person, after several poor nights, may experience that same study session as deeply unpleasant. Again, the goal may not be wrong. The body may simply be undersupported. This is one reason some people create beautiful plans on weekends and abandon them on weekdays. The weekend self writes from a slightly restored body. The weekday self lives inside accumulated fatigue. The two selves look inconsistent, but they may simply be functioning under different physical conditions. Tension also matters. A stressed body stays slightly braced, jaw tight, chest shallow, shoulders raised, stomach unsettled, breathing limited. In that state, the nervous system is already spending energy on defense. Then one more demand arrives, even a good demand, and it feels like too much. This is hard to notice because people are used to thinking in mental language. They say, I am lazy, unmotivated, distracted, or weak. But sometimes the more accurate sentence would be, my body has been carrying too much tension for too long. The body does not care whether the next task is noble. It responds to load. If the load is high enough, it begins choosing relief. Sit down, eat something fast, scroll, lie still, postpone, reduce input. These are not always wise choices, but they are deeply understandable biological responses. Imagine a man working through a heavy week. He wakes early, commutes, solves problems all day, listens carefully, stays polite, keeps going. By the time he returns home, he has already made 100 small decisions and carried several hours of low-level stress. He planned to study English after dinner. He wants to. The desire is real. The goal still matters. But when he opens the book, his eyes move across the page with unusual slowness. The sentences blur. His body leans back. He feels annoyed at how hard simple focus has become. Then he closes the book and reaches for his phone. From the outside, it looks like another evening of poor discipline. From the inside, the body may have already crossed its limit. There is a major difference between unwillingness and depletion, but many people never learn to separate them. Because of that, they treat exhaustion like a moral issue. This creates unnecessary shame. Shame does not restore the nervous system. It does not loosen muscles. It does not correct sleep debt. It does not replace missed meals or calm a stress-loaded body. It only adds another layer of burden. Then the next day begins with even less capacity. Food can shape this more than people expect. When meals are irregular, too small, rushed, or built mostly around quick sugar, energy becomes unstable. Focus rises and falls sharply. Irritation comes sooner. The mind becomes less patient with slow tasks. Hydration also matters in quiet ways. A mildly dehydrated body may not announce itself clearly, but it can reduce mental clarity and make effort feel heavier than it needs to. Movement matters too. This may sound strange because movement itself takes energy, but a body that never resets through walking, stretching, fresh air, or a change of posture often becomes more stagnant and more tired, not less. Stillness without recovery can turn into a kind of dull exhaustion. The person may say, I need more rest, while what their body actually needs is a different form of care. None of this is about perfection. No one needs ideal sleep, ideal meals, ideal hydration, and ideal exercise before they are allowed to pursue a goal. Real life is messier than that. But if quitting keeps happening, the body deserves to be included in the explanation. Maybe you're not repeatedly abandoning yourself. Maybe you're repeatedly asking a strained system to perform as if it were fresh. That mismatch creates discouragement very quickly. The body also remembers patterns. If your usual routine teaches the body that evenings mean collapse, then each evening the nervous system may prepare for low function. If mornings are rushed and nights are overstimulated, the body learns instability. If every effort comes after depletion, then effort itself begins to feel linked with pain. This is how physical fatigue can slowly influence identity. A person begins by saying, "I'm tired lately." Then, after enough failed follow-through, they start saying, "I am just not disciplined." The first statement describes a condition. The second creates a self-story. That shift is dangerous because it turns reparable physical strain into a permanent personal trait. A tight body can also make thinking feel darker. When the chest feels compressed, breathing shallow, and head heavy, the mind often interprets life more negatively. Tasks seem bigger. Time feels shorter. Future effort feels less realistic. So quitting can arrive as a conclusion, even though the body helped produce the mood that made the conclusion believable. This is why it is important to see the sequence clearly. Poor sleep, high stress, tight muscles, inconsistent fuel, low movement, mental fatigue, reduced patience, more attraction to quick comfort, less tolerance for slow effort. Then comes the thought, "I guess I'm the kind of person who never sticks with things." The thought feels true, but it may be built on unexamined physical conditions. This does not explain everything. Some people quit for emotional reasons, reward reasons, environmental reasons, or old identity reasons. Often these layers overlap. But the body is never a minor detail. A person with enough rest can make decisions their exhausted self cannot. A regulated nervous system can return to the task more easily. A body with slightly more energy can tolerate boredom, frustration, and repetition with less drama. That small difference changes outcomes. If you keep quitting, it may help to ask a plain question. Am I asking my body to do careful, consistent work from a state of chronic strain? If the answer is yes, then the problem is not only discipline. The problem may be that your system is being pushed to produce steadiness without enough restoration. Bodies have limits. When those limits are ignored, quitting starts to look like a personality issue. But often it is simply the visible result of invisible fatigue. The body whispers first. It says, "I am tight. I am tired. I am overloaded. I am running low." When those whispers are missed for too long, the person often hears only the final message. "I cannot do this tonight." Then that single sentence gets mistaken for character when it may have begun as biology. Some patterns do not begin in the present. A person may think they're only struggling with a habit, a routine, or a goal. But underneath the current behavior, there could be an older story quietly shaping what feels safe and what feels dangerous. This older story is not always obvious. It may have begun in school, where mistakes felt public and embarrassing. It may have grown in a home where praise arrived only when performance was strong. It may have formed in environments where being capable mattered more than being honest about difficulty. Over time, a child in that kind of world can learn something subtle. Trying is not just trying. Trying is exposure. Effort becomes the moment where you can be seen falling short. That lesson can remain in the body and mind for years, even after life changes. A grown adult may sit alone at a desk, working toward a personal goal, and still feel a private version of the same old fear. If I keep going and do this badly, what will that say about me? This question has more power than many people realize. A woman remembers being the kind of student others described as smart. She was dependable, organized, and often praised for doing things well. On the surface, this sounds like a gift, and in some ways it was. But there could be a hidden cost when identity becomes tied too tightly to being competent. The cost is that struggle starts to feel threatening. Learning becomes less about growth and more about preserving an image. So later in life, when she begins something new and meets the awkward stage, she does not only face the difficulty of the task, she also faces a quiet identity disturbance. If I am capable, why do I feel so clumsy here? If I'm serious, why am I already slipping? If I care, why does this look so ordinary? These questions can create strong discomfort because they shake an old self-image. The easiest escape is often to step away before the struggle becomes too visible, even if it is visible only to yourself. This is one of the deeper roots of quitting. Stopping can feel safer than continuing badly. A man grows up in an environment where mistakes are quickly corrected, and weakness is rarely spoken about gently. He learns to stay sharp, hide uncertainty, and move toward things he can handle well. He becomes responsible. He becomes useful. He learns how to maintain control. Years later, he decides to improve an area of life that does not come easily. Maybe his language, money, study, fitness, or emotional regulation. At first, he is determined. But once the process becomes messy, the old pattern returns. He feels irritated faster than expected. He loses patience with slow progress. He starts avoiding the task after small slips. From the outside, it looks like he lacks consistency. Underneath, there may be a very old rule operating. Do not stay where your limitations are visible. Many people never say this rule out loud, yet it quietly guides behavior. It makes beginnings easy because beginnings are full of hope and image. It makes continuation hard because continuation reveals limits. This is why some people love goals that keep them in a planning stage. In planning, identity stays intact. In practice, identity gets tested. If effort was once tied to worth, then imperfect effort can feel humiliating, even in private. That humiliation may not appear as tears or obvious pain. It may appear as numbness, irritation, boredom, or sudden indifference. A person says, "I just lost interest." Sometimes they did, but sometimes interest is still there. And what disappeared was the willingness to remain in contact with an imperfect version of themselves. There is also the history of unfinished attempts. When someone has quit many times before, the past does not stay in the past. It follows the new attempt into the room. A fresh goal does not arrive alone. It arrives beside memory. Memory of the language course left unfinished. Memory of the exercise routine that lasted 12 days. Memory of the savings plan that slowly dissolved. Memory of the promises made at night and ignored in the morning. These memories shape identity. They collect into an internal archive, and after enough repetition, that archive begins speaking before the new effort has even developed. You tell yourself, "I know how this ends." That sentence can drain energy from the beginning of any serious attempt. A person no longer meets the task with simple curiosity. They meet it with suspicion toward themselves. And when self-suspicion becomes strong, quitting starts feeling almost reasonable. Why keep exposing yourself to another ending you think you already understand? There's another form of personal history that matters too. Some people were not allowed to move slowly. They were pushed, compared, rushed, or expected to improve quickly. As a result, they never built a peaceful relationship with gradual growth. Slow learning came to feel like failing. So when adult life asks them to build something through repetition, they feel immediate tension. The process is normal, but it feels wrong. They think this should be easier by now. They think if I were truly capable, I would already be further ahead. They think if this still feels awkward, maybe I'm not meant for it. All of these thoughts grow from the same wound. The awkward middle feels unsafe because slowness was never made emotionally safe. This creates a painful pattern. You want progress, but you do not know how to live inside the natural pace of progress without feeling diminished. So you reach for a clean result too early. And when the result does not come, you leave. Not always because you're giving up on the goal itself. Sometimes you're giving up on the emotional pain of being a beginner, a learner, a person in process. That pain can be stronger in people who built their identity around reliability or strength. If you're used to being the one who handles things, understands quickly, or performs well, then meeting confusion can feel strangely intimate. It can unsettle how you see yourself. This is why highly responsible people sometimes quit private goals more than others expect. They are not unserious. They are often protecting an image that has helped them survive for years. The image says, I handle things. But growth says, for a while, you may not handle this well at all. If the image is rigid, quitting becomes a defense. Personal history can also include emotional neglect. Even when life looked functional from the outside, a person may have learned that difficulty should be handled alone, quietly, without much comfort or understanding. Later, when their own effort becomes hard, they do not know how to support themselves through it. They only know how to pressure themselves or abandon the effort. Gentle recovery was never modeled. So after inconsistency, the person has only two inner tools: push harder or disappear. Neither tool creates steadiness. Steadiness usually comes from something more balanced: honest effort, clear limits, and a way of returning without self-rejection. But if no one taught you that, quitting may become part of your identity long before you understand why. You may say, I have always been like this. Yet many times, what feels like personality is actually adaptation. You adapted to criticism by hiding struggle. You adapted to pressure by avoiding visible imperfection. You adapted to uncertainty by preferring clean beginnings over messy continuation. These adaptations may have protected you once, but later they interfere with the kind of life you want to build. This does not mean the past must control the future. It means the pattern should be named honestly. If you keep quitting, part of the answer may be this: continuing forces you to stay in contact with an older fear. The fear that imperfect effort reveals something shameful about who you are. Stopping protects you from that fear for a little while. It gives distance. It lets the image recover. It allows you to imagine that you could still do it well someday. Just not right now. That someday can be very comforting. It preserves possibility without requiring exposure. But lives are quietly shaped by what we keep postponing in order to protect identity. A person can spend years waiting to return when they feel more ready, more certain, more strong, more naturally gifted. Meanwhile, the real opportunity was never perfection. The real opportunity was learning how to remain present while looking unfinished. That is hard for people with certain histories. Still, it is possible. The first step is not forcing confidence. It is seeing that the pattern may be older than the current goal. When you understand that, quitting starts to look less like random weakness and more like a repeated attempt to stay safe inside an old identity system. The system may say, if I cannot do this well, I would. Rather not be seen trying, even if the only person watching is you. Once that system becomes visible, the pattern loses some of its mystery. You begin to see that every unfinished attempt was not only about poor discipline, It was also about protection. Protection from shame. Protection from slowness. Protection from the fear that effort without immediate success might damage the story you've been carrying about yourself for years. And when the hidden story becomes clearer, a new possibility opens. You do not have to stop building your life every time your image feels uncomfortable. You can learn to let the image soften. You can let yourself be in process without treating that state like a threat. For many people, this is where quitting finally begins to change. Not when they become more intense, but when they no longer need to protect an old version of themselves so fiercely. Sometimes the problem is not inside you first. Sometimes the room is working against you. A person can care deeply, make a sincere plan, and still fail to follow through, because the environment surrounding the task keeps adding friction. When this happens repeatedly, it is easy to blame personality. But personality is only one part of the picture. Space shapes behavior more than most people expect. A cluttered desk quietly drains attention. A phone within reach invites interruption before focus has fully formed. A goal that has no clear place in the day keeps competing with everything else that feels urgent. Small obstacles seem harmless, yet together they can wear down follow-through. Imagine a table at home in the evening. Mail is spread across one corner. A charger is tangled beside a cup. The laptop is open to old tabs. A phone lights up every few minutes. The chair is uncomfortable. The room is warm. Another person is talking nearby. The task for the night is supposed to begin in this space. Nothing here looks like failure. Still, everything here makes continuation harder. This matters because good intentions are often fragile in high-friction environments. A task that already requires effort should not also require 10 extra acts of preparation before it can begin. But that is exactly how many people live. They want to study, but first they must clear the table. They want to exercise, but the floor is crowded and the clothes are buried. They want to practice speaking, but there is no quiet corner that feels usable. They want to save money, but shopping apps and tempting messages sit one tap away all day. They want to sleep earlier, but bright screens and scattered routines keep the mind stimulated late into the night. Over time, the environment keeps sending the same message. Do something else first. This message is powerful because it rarely sounds dramatic. It comes through objects, layout, noise, convenience, timing, and visibility. It nudges rather than commands. A person may not notice how often they are being nudged away from the life they say they want. A woman decides she will practice English for 30 minutes every evening. She is serious. She makes time on paper. She believes the problem before was motivation. But each night she arrives home to the same scene. The television is already on. Her phone carries messages from the day. The kitchen still needs attention. The study book is inside a drawer. The headphones are in another room. By the time she sits down, the hour feels fragmented before it even begins. The task has not failed yet. The setup has. This is the hidden power of environment. It can exhaust a decision before the action has even started. If every good habit depends on constant effort against the structure of your space, then even sincere people will struggle. The environment keeps asking for extra self-control, and self-control is not endless. Many people think consistent behavior comes mostly from strength. In reality, a great deal of consistent behavior comes from reduced friction. When the shoes are already by the door, walking begins more easily. When the book is already open on the desk, studying begins more easily. When the phone is in another room, attention stays more intact. When food is prepared simply, eating becomes less chaotic. When a task has a visible home, Returning becomes less mentally expensive. These are small things, but small things repeated daily create large effects. A man says he keeps quitting his morning routine. He thinks the issue is weak discipline. But every morning begins with confusion. He wakes up too late because sleep is inconsistent. The room is dark. Clothes are not ready. The phone is beside the bed. Messages arrive immediately. The first minutes of the day are already captured by noise. Then he wonders why the routine disappears. He is trying to begin the day from within a structure that invites fragmentation. This happens in digital spaces too. Modern life places endless alternatives directly in front of us. A task on a laptop sits one click away from news, shopping, short videos, email, and entertainment. A phone designed to capture attention lives in the same hand that is supposed to build calm focus. This means a person is not failing inside a neutral environment. They're trying to stay steady inside a system built to interrupt them. That should change how self-judgment sounds. You may still need responsibility, but you also need honesty. If your environment keeps rewarding distraction and making meaningful effort inconvenient, then quitting will happen more easily than you think. Environment also includes timing. Some people keep assigning important work to the most depleted part of their day. Then they blame themselves when follow-through collapses. But if the task always arrives at the hour when your body is tired, your mind scattered, and your home full of interruption, the setup itself is weak. This does not mean everyone can choose ideal timing. Real life has limits. Work, children, commuting, energy, and family rhythms all shape what is possible. Still, the truth remains. A habit placed in the wrong part of the day may keep failing not because the habit is wrong, but because the environment around that hour is hostile to it. There's also the issue of unclear cues. Behavior sticks more easily when it is attached to something concrete. After breakfast, at the desk by the window, when the children sleep, after I put my bag down, before I turn on the television. Without a clear cue, the task floats. A floating task keeps relying on memory and mood. It has no anchor, so the mind keeps delaying, negotiating, and forgetting. Then the person says, "I knew what to do, but I still did not do it." Very often, the task was never given a stable place to live. Physical space can either support identity or weaken it. If your room constantly shows you unfinished clutter, overdue tasks, open distractions, and no visible signs of the life you want to practice, it becomes harder to feel like someone who follows through. The space keeps reflecting disorder back to you. This can quietly affect mood. A crowded space creates low-level tension. A noisy space shortens patience. A space without boundaries makes every goal compete with everything else. Even a simple action like putting one notebook, one pen, and one lamp in the same corner every day can change the emotional tone of effort. It tells the nervous system, this is where we return. That kind of consistency reduces resistance. Many people do the opposite without realizing it. They try to build serious goals inside unstable environments. Today they study at the kitchen table, tomorrow on the couch, the next day in bed with the phone nearby, then at a desk full of unrelated papers. Every session begins from a different context. The body receives no repeated signal. The task never becomes familiar enough to feel normal. In that kind of setup, effort stays expensive. It must be restarted mentally each time. And mental restarts cost energy. This is one reason people feel that beginning is always harder than it should be. The environment never helps carry memory. Everything depends on motivation in the moment. A better environment does not remove difficulty, but it changes the balance. It makes the desired action more visible. It makes distractions less convenient. It reduces the number of decisions required before starting. It gives the task a home. It creates cues the body can learn. It lets ordinary effort happen with less negotiation. This matters especially for people who are already tired, self-critical, or easily pulled toward quick relief. A chaotic environment magnifies all of those vulnerabilities. A supportive one softens them. If you keep quitting, it is worth asking some plain questions. Where does this habit live physically? What objects are always near me when I fail to follow through? What distractions are easier to reach than the thing I say matters? How many steps stand between intention and action? At what hour am I asking this task to survive? These questions are practical, but they are not small. A person can spend years trying to change through sheer force, while the room, the phone, the layout, and the timing quietly keep undoing that effort. Then they call themselves inconsistent. But maybe they have simply been underestimating structure. A life is not built by intention alone. It is also built by what is visible, reachable, prepared, repeated, and easy to return to. That is why quitting can sometimes be a design problem before it becomes an identity problem. The desk matters. The phone matters. The doorway, the drawer, the lighting, the time of day, the noise level. The arrangement of simple things, all of it matters. These details do not replace discipline. They support it. And when support is missing, even a sincere mind can keep slipping. Not because it does not want the goal, because the world around it keeps making another path easier. There's a quieter way to begin again. Not the dramatic reset. Not the late-night promise that this time everything will change. Not the version of effort that asks you to become a new person by tomorrow morning. A quieter way begins with less fantasy and more honesty. It begins by seeing that quitting was not random. There were reasons. Shame may have been there. Fatigue may have been there. Old identity fears may have been there. A reward-hungry brain may have been there. A difficult environment may have been there. Once you see that, the goal is no longer to fight yourself like an enemy. The goal is to build a way of continuing that asks less from fantasy and more from reality. A man wakes early before the sun has fully filled the room. The house is still. The light is soft against a small desk in the corner. On the desk, there is only one notebook, one pen, and one simple list. Nothing about the scene is dramatic. There is no speech in his head about changing his whole life. There is no pressure to recover everything he missed. There is no performance in it. He sits down and gives himself one task. Not the perfect routine, not the ideal comeback, just one clear return. This is the mindset shift many people need. They do not need bigger promises. They need a smaller emotional distance between falling off and coming back. When the distance is too large, restarting feels heavy. You think you must return with intensity to make up for what was lost. You think you must feel confident before you begin. You think you must restore the image of the disciplined version of yourself. That is often too much. A better path is softer and more precise. You miss a day, then you return in a smaller way. You lose rhythm, then you do the next visible step. You feel resistance. Then you reduce the task until resistance no longer gets the final word. This does not look impressive from the outside, but this is how continuity is repaired. Many people keep quitting because they only respect effort when it feels strong. If the workout is short, it does not count. If the study session is imperfect, it does not count. If the room is only partly cleaned, it does not count. If the day did not match the plan, the whole day feels wasted. This mindset turns life into a harsh scoreboard. It leaves no room for partial returns. And partial returns are often the exact bridge that keeps a person from disappearing for weeks. A woman who once stopped studying for for 10 days now sits down for 15 minutes instead of waiting for the perfect hour. She does not tell herself, "It is enough forever." She tells herself, "It is enough for tonight." That sentence matters. Enough for tonight. It lowers the emotional pressure. It allows the nervous system to re-enter the task without feeling trapped inside a grand promise. It changes the meaning of action. The action is no longer proof that she has become a perfect person. It is simply proof that she is still in relationship with the goal. That relationship matters more than intensity. A goal survives through contact. A person who keeps touching the goal, even in small ways, stays alive inside it. A person who disappears every time the weather inside them changes keeps losing the thread. This is why one of the most useful shifts is moving from all or nothing thinking to ongoing contact. Not perfection. Contact. The book opens again. The shoes go on again. The application moves one line forward. The budget is looked at again. The room is reset for 5 minutes. The language is spoken badly, but spoken. This kind of movement does not feed the ego much. It is quiet, but builds trust in a deeper way than dramatic restarts ever do. Trust grows when you learn that a bad day does not automatically become a vanished week. Trust grows when you stop punishing yourself for being human in the middle of change. There is another shift here. Many people think they need to feel different before they act differently. They wait to feel ready, clear, sure, motivated, or inspired. Often that feeling comes after action, not before it. The early morning man at the desk is not full of certainty. He is simply willing to begin without demanding emotional permission from every part of himself. He does not wait for the perfect mood to arrive and approve the task. He lets the action be small enough to survive an imperfect mood. That is wisdom. It respects reality. It understands that moods rise and fall, bodies change, attention drifts, and days become uneven. Instead of asking life to be stable first, it creates a form of effort that can still exist inside ordinary instability. This is also where self-respect becomes more grounded. Self-respect is not always loud confidence. Sometimes it is the decision not to abandon yourself because yesterday was messy. Sometimes it is choosing a smaller promise you can keep. Sometimes it is refusing to turn one bad stretch into an identity sentence. You do not need to call yourself disciplined before you act. You act in a way that slowly makes the word more believable. This takes patience. A person who has quit many times may want immediate proof that this new approach will work. They may want to feel transformed in a week. But the deeper change is slower and more ordinary. The real win is not that you never slip again. The real win is that slipping no longer leads to disappearance. That is a different life. A person who returns sooner suffers less. They waste less energy in shame. They lose fewer weeks to avoidance. They stop turning interruption into identity. They begin to understand that steadiness is not the absence of struggle. It is the skill of reentry. Reentry can be built very practically. Make the next step visible. Reduce the size of the return. Prepare the space before you need it. Protect 1 hour better instead of redesigning the whole week. Keep one promise small enough that your tired self can still meet it. Do not confuse low emotion with no value. Do not let one missed day start telling a story about who you are. These are not dramatic ideas. But drama is often what kept the old cycle alive. The old cycle loved intensity at the beginning and shame in the middle. The new cycle is quieter. It values repeatability over excitement. It values honesty over image. It values contact over perfection. It values one real action over a beautiful fantasy. This is how a person slowly becomes harder to break. Not by becoming severe, not by demanding more and more from themselves, but by building a way of living that can hold ordinary weakness without collapsing into surrender. That is a mature kind of strength. It does not need applause. It does not announce itself. It shows up in small returns that no one else sees. A notebook opened on a difficult evening. A short walk instead of none. A page read with tired eyes. A phone placed in another room. A morning that begins with one simple task instead of a grand emotional speech. These things look modest. Still, they change the shape of a life. If you have been quitting for a long time, the answer may not be to become more intense. The answer may be to become more steady, more realistic, and less cruel with yourself in the moments when effort loses its clean feeling. Because the clean feeling never stays. What can stay is a calmer relationship with return. Morning light touches the desk. The room is plain. The task is small. Nothing announces a major transformation. And that is the point. A life does not usually change when a person feels extraordinary. It changes when they learn how to come back in ordinary moments and begin again without making the whole act so heavy.